Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining me once again as we consider these day texts. We're currently working our way through the book of Genesis, as those of you who regularly join me know. And we've talked about a lot of stuff, a lot of very important things that can be a deciding factor, really, for many people when it comes to whether they believe in God or whether they believe we're all just an accident. For joining me once again. Let me get my sound here. I had a lot going on this morning, so I apologize for being a few minutes late. But I did give some notifications so you knew I was going to do the show. And so let's get on with it. We're in Genesis chapter 1. We've talked about a lot of different things, as I mentioned. And they're very important because, as I said, there are people who base their decision about God on whether the Genesis account is correct. And so you may have some who, for example, question, how plant seeds and trees could come before the luminaries. But all you have to do is show them, as we've discussed, that light and everything that the sun does was already made by Jah. He simply made the luminaries as the things which would contain the same things or reflect the same things necessary for light to exist apart from him, as he was bringing light during the days of creation before the luminaries. So things like that, very important. Also very important, humankind. And we've gotten to the point where humans are made. We've talked about everything else. Like I said, the sun, the moon, the sky, the ocean creatures, the flying creatures. We've talked about the days of creation and at which point they actually began to, with the luminaries in place and all the stars, provide for signs, fixed periods, days, and years. Now the land is here, land animals are here, insects are thriving, all the crawling things of the earth, reptiles, and humans. Male and female. And so here in today's reading, we're going to see what God says in this first account. There's more than one account because the first account we're reading in Genesis 1 is the whole thing, all of it. And then once we review all of the things that were made, which we're getting close to completing, we're going to move on and talk about what Genesis describes in more detail as the creation of you and I, or the first humankind. So, but before we get to that, we're going to talk a little bit more about the things that Jah told the first humans and the first animals in terms of the blessing that he gave. But specifically, we're going to focus on humankind today. There will be some reference, of course, to the other things made, but let's talk about in what sense. Genesis chapter 1, verses 28 through 31. I read the Hebrew, the translation of the Hebrew first, followed by the Greek, and we'll do that for each of the four texts we're going to consider. Starting with the Hebrew, it says, "Then God began to bless them," that is the man and the woman, "and say to them, multiply and become many, and fill the earth, and use it to your liking, and rule among the fish of the sea, and among the flying creatures of the sky heavens, and among every living thing which is moving upon the earth." Verse 28, Greek translation, "Then God blessed them by saying, you must increase and multiply and fill up the earth, and you must exercise authority over the earth, and you must rule the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky heaven, and all of the pack animals, and everything belonging to the earth, and all of the reptiles which are moving upon the earth." Verse 29, Hebrew translation, "Then God began to say, behold, I have given you every plant sowing seed which is upon the surface of the entire earth, and every one of the trees in which seed is sown in the tree fruit, in order to become ready for the purpose of eating. Verse 29, Greek translation, then God said, behold, I have given you every seed plant sowing seed which is upon the whole earth, and every tree which has in itself fruit from a sown seed. It will be as food to you. Verse 30, Hebrew translation, also to every living creature of the earth, and to all of the flying creatures of the sky heavens, and to all of the creatures crawling upon the earth in which there is a living soul, I have given all of the green plant growth for the purpose of eating. So it came about just like that. Verse 30, Greek translation, and to all animals of the earth, and to all flying creatures of the sky heaven, and to every crawling reptile on the earth, which has in itself a soul of life, I have given all green plant as food. So it came about just like that. Verse 30, our last verse, Hebrew and Greek translation. Then we'll talk about it. Excuse me. Then God saw all of the things he had made, and behold, it was all extremely good. And there came to be a time for darkness and a time for light. This time for light was the 6th day. Verse 31, Greek translation, our last day text reading for today. Then we'll talk about it. Then God saw everything, as much as he made, and behold, it was all extremely good. So there came to be a time for darkness and a time for light. This time for light was a 6th day. Okay, there's so much in here, but yet it's very simple in its description, I find, in the sense that it talks about the types of creatures, the types of plants that we eat, that is those sowing seed. And we're going to show, as I've shown in other videos, different things that are made, what it's describing here in more detail. But let's talk about the first thing that it does. It refers to them multiplying, becoming many, and filling the earth. I noticed that the live stream cut, but I'm going to keep going, and I'll re-upload the video later if a significant part is missing. So, okay, and as I said, the live stream appeared to have cut off, but we'll keep going, and we'll, as I mentioned also, you may or may not have heard, depends on what was cut. I'll upload the whole video if a significant portion's missing and detracts from the quality. Okay, so looks like it's back online. I was talking about the first part of the reading. We'll get to the seed bearing trees and plants in more detail in a moment. But let's focus on the first part. Okay, so it says God blessed them by saying to them, multiply, become many, and fill the earth. Use it to your liking, rule among the fish, the flying creatures, and every living thing upon the earth. And in prior videos, we've talked about those things in the ocean, the flying creatures, and the things moving upon the earth. So let's focus on the very first part, multiply and become many. All right. Well, we do that today by having heterosexual relationships, right? We are designed. We've talked in prior videos, and we respect other people's views. Let me get that out of the way, right? Let me say this before I say another word. Everything I say from this point forward, as I hope that preceded, but I'm making a special effort here and putting everyone on notice that whether you like or don't like what I'm going to say next, or some of it, I don't care. I only care if you have reasons to reject my evidence. Yeah, I'm not saying what I'm about to say to offend anyone. I'm saying what I'm about to say to show everyone what I believe is true, what I believe is correct, what I'm prepared to stand up before anyone, anywhere that I would have to, and show this is correct, this is why, and this is not correct, and That's why. Okay? So unless you're prepared to do that, I don't want to hear it. I'm not interested in just because you don't like someone disagreeing with you. That's life. If you haven't figured that part out yet, there's not much I can do for you or that anyone can do for you. We're here to talk about evidence, history, and whether it's correct. Okay? And I've been citing evidence in all of these videos and talking about it, reading the text. And that's what I'm going to do next. Just because it involves sex or it involves the right way or the wrong way that I believe we can show with evidence is correct or incorrect, I'm going to follow that same pattern. Just because it might offend someone who practices a certain way of life, that's not my problem. If you're allowed by law to practice a certain way of life, I'm not going to stop you. I may not agree with you. I don't have to agree with you just because something's legal. Just because it's legal to smoke cigarettes doesn't mean I have to like smoking cigarettes, right? Just because it's legal to have an abortion, that doesn't mean I have to like having an abortion or promote abortion or promote cigarettes. Well, why would I promote something I believe is incorrect when it comes to sex? No one would do that unless you're influenced or pressured by people who don't want you to remind them in society of what's incorrect. Okay, so that's why I'm prefacing this in that way, because I know sometimes people get offended. So do I, okay? And if I don't want to hear something, I just move on, right? You can do the same. But if you want to consider the facts, and that's what you came here for, that's what you're going to hear. I'm not just going to tell you what I think because I feel a certain way. I feel a certain way because of what I think about the facts. And if you can show that's different, if you can show I'm not basing my view or comments on the best or even good evidence, then it's your responsibility to point that out and to tell me why. Otherwise, if you can't do that and I'm right in that I have the right evidence, maybe you should accept that, right? Isn't that supposed to be the thing we use to make decisions in the first place? Even if it isn't, let's talk about it. So sex, right? We reproduce, we multiply by having sex. We're designed to have sex. All over the place we've got, I talked just a second ago about different people, and of course today there are a lot of people with a lot of money and influence, or that, in my opinion, there's just a lot of weak people actually. I don't know why you would let money or people who are abusing their or other people's body have influence over you. They're the last people I would listen to when it comes to things like sex, what to do, right? They're doing it incorrectly if they're not doing it like this. If you're not having normal heterosexual sex, then there's no other kind of sex that would match the way we're made. It's that simple. It doesn't mean you can't have sex with someone of the same gender. There's ways that we'll talk about. But for some reason, even though it's obvious that the ways that other people choose other than the hetero way, male and female, I'm not going to get into too much description. You see the anatomy. We all have it. This is not a mystery. These things are obvious. And you can look them up, one search, boom, you've got it all. You can see everything, the differences, what they do, how they work, all the complementary features, nothing bad unless you do it wrong, and get diseases in ways because of doing it wrong and being with people in ways that are wrong. Because when you have sex in another way, for example, the way most gay men have sex, that is using the anus, well, it can go wrong. You can have problems because the anus is not designed for sex. This is not a subjective observation. I don't care if you can use the male organ in a human anus and somehow um, excite a nerve in there. We have nerves everywhere. That's the anus is not designed with nerves for sex, okay? The pelvic nerve that you can reach apparently using the anus is the pelvic nerve. It's not the anal nerve. It's not the nerve that's there lining the anus so that a male penis can repeatedly go inside and ejaculate and go through a reproductive act. See, when we have sex the right way, male penis, female vagina, these are basic terms. I'm not going to hide it. You don't like it, you can mute it or come back later when I'm done. But I have more to say. So what I'm talking about is what we already know, and it's kind of strange because today's media and life, they talk about it the backwards way, the opposite, right? They are constantly putting down normal heterosexual relationships, and they're promoting the worst types of examples of the people who really are promoting a different way. Like, look at Miley Cyrus. Whether or not her relationship with Liam Hemsworth was the typical heterosexual model, I mean, they didn't have any kids. She didn't want kids. You don't have to have kids, but that's what sex is for. It leads to that. And so now you have Miley, who's obviously involved with several women, at least one. She's not going to have a child that way. Impossible. They would have to go outside of each other and do some other method that would involve a male sperm. So they can't do it. They're going against the way they were made. Why? Well, it's obvious. They want the pleasure. Right? See, they can still stimulate each other, but they're damaging themselves by that form of stimulation. Okay, let's get back to the anal for a minute because that's more obvious. And I think you can show also, I look at Miley Cyrus, right? I mean, what mother out there would really want their daughter to look like her? Come on. If so, go for it. I probably won't meet your daughter because that's not at all attractive. No man finds Miley Cyrus attractive, okay? That's why she's with women. All right, back to the anus again. So let's just read this one part from the clevelandclinic.org small summary. And then I'm going to show some photos. Nothing too terrible, don't worry. The anus is the last part of the digestive tract. It's not a sex organ. It is a 2-inch long canal consisting of the pelvic floor muscles and the 2 anal sphincters, internal and external, because the pelvic bone and structure works with the whole area there. You're not supposed to be stimulating the pelvic nerves by misusing the anus. The lining of the upper anus is specialized to detect rectal contents. It lets you know whether the contents are liquid, gas, or solid. The muscles only go out. They don't receive in like the female vagina. If you go to my site, elihubooks.com, topical index, down to S for sex, there's an article right here. I'm just going to share part of it, okay? I said I'd give facts. I'm not just saying this because I don't practice these forms of sex. This is from the Corporate Resource Council, the Health Risks of Gay Sex by Dr. John R. Diggs, Jr. And I'm just going to read a couple paragraphs of the executive summary, okay? On page I, right here. Let's just read this part together, a couple paragraphs, and then we'll further and finalize this discussion about reproduction and how it should be done right. You can still do it wrong, but it's wrong. And if we say it's wrong because we can show it's wrong, we're not wrong. You're wrong. So we should stop letting these people make us feel wrong. That stops. If it hasn't already, that's over. Okay? At this point, if you haven't already established yourself to speak clearly with facts about these issues, then let me share this with you. Just a couple paragraphs. Common sexual practices among gay men lead to numerous STDs and physical injuries, some of which are virtually unknown in the heterosexual population. Lesbians are also at higher risk. for STDs, in addition to diseases that may be transmitted during lesbian sex. A study at an Australian STD clinic found that lesbians were 3 to 4 times more likely than heterosexual women to have sex with men who were high risk for HIV. Mental health, that's just a snippet of the physical stuff. It is well established that there are high rates of psychiatric illnesses, including depression, drug abuse, and suicide attempts among gays and lesbians. This is true even in the Netherlands, where gay, lesbian, and bisexual GLB relationships are far more socially acceptable than in the US. Depression and drug abuse are strongly associated with risky sexual practices that lead to serious medical problems. Keep this in mind, because I'm going to suggest something here in a moment, or in a moment, that's maybe a little controversial, but I think it makes sense. Let's just read 2 more paragraphs. Lifespan. We're talking about gay sex versus regular heterosexual sex. Regular in the sense that we're designed to have heterosexual sex that's pleasurable, doesn't cause any of these problems, and leads to children. And while those may be looked down upon by many today, right? You look at the rates of abortion. Obviously, people are promoting their desire for sex over humans. It's the same with gay sex, right? They're misusing each other's body and they get to do it. I'm not here to stop them. I'm just here to stop them from mischaracterizing what they're doing as correct, as somehow acceptable in the same way that heterosexual sex is. That's not, and it's demonstrably so. 100%. Like evolution versus creation, we're in the backwards realm. They've got evolution over creation. They've got gay sex over heterosex. They're doing abortion promotions more than promoting family unity and birth and children and productivity, multiplication, increase, like Josh said. Lifespan, the only epidemiological study to date on the lifespan of gay men, concluded that gay and bisexual men lose up to 20 years of life expectancy. That's how much damage it does to you. Then there's monogamy. Monogamy, meaning long-term sexual fidelity, is rare in GLB relationships, particularly among gay men. One study reported that 66% of gay couples reported sex outside the relationship within the first year, and nearly 90% if the relationship lasted 5 years. So you have a 90% chance, if you're in a gay male relationship, that your partner's going to have been with another gay male who may have been with other gay males. And the reason that's a problem is because not only are we not designed to have that kind of sex, you cannot multiply and increase that way. It leads to all these problems, physical problems, mental problems, lifespan reduction, decrease in population because you don't have any children, unless you decide to adopt or go through other processes, but it's not as common. The damage done in male gay sex, let's focus on that for a minute, is so significant because it creates an increase in, not only does it damage the two parties involved more than, say, even lesbian gay sex, which has its own problems, as we read, but the damage being done by males to their rear end is leading to a rise in anal cancer, a rise in HIV because of the anal tearing that takes place. It's more damaging. And when you're damaging each other and you're tearing each other open, blood is now involved. You're using semen, oh my God, semen, fecal matter, all the stuff that's not supposed to be involved. There's nothing that shows that that combination of things does anything, especially in the rear end, but cause immunosuppression, that is a reduction in your immune system's ability to function, which is then what creates further conditions that leads to HIV. And so your body responds negatively. It knows what you're doing. You're not supposed to be ejaculating into a digestive tract. right? You're supposed to be doing that into a female organ that is designed to receive male sperm with the egg at the right time and reproduce. It's a design. You're misusing the design, gay folks. You're allowed to do it. I'll fight for your right to do it as long as it's legal. Or if you're being abused, I'll step in and stop the abuser. But I'm not going to hide the facts. And you're going to have to face them. Because we're done with you promoting this abusive practice, this gay sex, as if it's the right thing. It's not. And everybody knows it. So what I'm proposing is if people continue to promote gay sex, and this is where it gets controversial. I'm going to clip this and I'm going to put it up because I think it's important. Couples who marry and who are gay and have gay sex, because of the damage that they're doing that we just read about, physical damage, they're causing healthcare costs to increase, mental costs, they're damaging themselves in these ways and they're causing our costs to increase. All the amount of money being spent on HIV medicines and research just to keep people who had abusive practices in their life alive. They chose these things. Unless they were raped or born that way, that's different. We should try to help people like that, of course. But if you chose to do these abusive things and you got a disease from it, that's on you. I didn't do it. Nobody else did it. You did it. You chose to use something you know you're not supposed to use. And that all the scientific data available for anyone who even cares a little bit to consider will tell you gay sex is bad for you. That's why most people don't do it. That's why the Bible is so against it. That's why in the opening of Genesis it tells us not to have gay sex, but to have sex between the genders and multiply, fill the earth. The opposite of the consequence, in most cases, of gay sex. And there's no way that with this much damage involved in gay sex that God could have made it that way anyway and said it was good. Because by design, our anus, the part that male gays use so frequently, is not supposed to be used for sex. We can talk about the same things in relation to lesbians, but I'm not going to over discuss this issue. My point is, gays are promoting an abusive form of sex. It's damaging them and it's damaging society. I don't understand why it's not considered a sin tax, right? What's a sin tax? A sin tax is a tax on items considered undesirable or harmful, such as alcohol or tobacco. Okay, well, gay sex is undesirable. It involves not only abuse, but it involves an area of the human body which the senses, the smell, everything tells you that's bad for you. It involves toxic waste, okay? Human fecal matter. The body's trying to get that out. And gays, some gays are really careful and they do these different things to clean out their digestive tract and stuff, but still, they're pushing what's trying to get out back in, right? They're basically pushing back on the organ that's trying to push out the toxins and waste. So there's no way to avoid that causing damage and the damage from the anal tearing due to the thinness of the anus, and versus the way that the female vagina is clearly designed. That's not a problem for it at all in that way. I believe gay sex should be taxed. It should be taxed because it is damaging society, both by obviously damaging the participants physically and mentally. That is causing a destruction of our societal components because people are more sick, they're less mentally able to function, and they require more health care. We just read it, and I only read a part of it. So if things like alcohol and tobacco, because of the damage they do to people, are taxed, I don't understand why gay sex is not taxed. So there should be a sodomy tax. Or just put it in the regular sin tax. I am serious. There's no reason why gay sex, if it's legal, it's legal. Just like alcohol and tobacco. Why isn't it taxed though? It's obviously damaging. I'm not making this up. This is not controversial. You can look this up. It's everywhere except those who don't want to promote it. They can't even get a view to be accepted that, for example, would show that the anus is meant to have sex on a regular basis without damage. It's obvious, right? We all have one. We know what it does. Many of these cities that are terrible seem to have a higher acceptance of things like gay sex, these destructive practices. And what did I say? Look at the effect they're having. They definitely damage both parties, right? Just like alcohol and tobacco damages the consumer. Gay sex is even worse because it's damaging two people at one time. Unless you have like secondhand smoke and stuff like that with tobacco or alcohol, maybe you're driving and you kill someone. So that can happen too. But the gay sex is more of a willing two-party involvement thing. So two people are willingly damaging themselves for the purpose of showing affection and replicating normal sex's climactic experience. Orgasmic experience, right? There's just a copy of the real thing, but they're using the anus, not the vagina. And so, but the damages is so much more, and there's no positive benefit, right? There's no children for society. It's all take. It's all personal experience at the expense of each party and everybody else, right? There's nothing gay sex benefits anybody with. People who are gay may benefit people in different ways, but the gay sex, okay, you understand what I'm saying? The sex act itself has no benefit to anybody in any way other than the replication of the orgasmic part of sex. That's it. And even that comes with more consequences than would be warranted, which you could get without all the consequence. So it's, but beyond that, there's no benefit to society, okay? There's nothing. You might individually get an experience like the orgasm from it. But outside of that replicated effect, there's nothing. It's only taking away. And so I say it should be taxed. There's no reason it shouldn't be taxed. None. It's destructive. It's legal destruction of each party. What did we just read? I'm not making this up. They lose on average 20 years of their life. Okay, so what effect does that have on society? That means all these gay people are giving back 20, on average, 20 less years of productive life to society. They're damaging society in every single way. In this way, in this way, and in this way. So, if we're trying to help people, right? If they want to choose something, we're not here to force them out of a mindset. That wouldn't make any benefit anyway. You have to choose. You have to see what's right and do it or don't. But we can tax it. If you're going to damage us and damage society and promote every movie that promotes, I would say, that promotes cigarettes, anything destructive, that openly promotes it to children and young ones, non-adults. So maybe you have the rating system that would help that. But that would be true for gay things too. Any promotion of gay lifestyle, because it's so destructive and damaging, has to be taxed. It has to be taxed because the effect it's having by including gay sex or gay sex elements or the positive promotion of gay sex is going to negatively affect anyone who accepts it, and that is also then going to damage society around those people, including those people. So I've thought about this, and there's no way. It's actually something I think someone should file litigation over, or at least for legislation, because this has to happen now. This will solve part of the San Francisco poop problem, and, well, maybe not. I mean, it's just too late for them now. It'll help other cities, though, because people will be less likely to accept just random sodomy and or be sodomized at all. And what did we read? Remember, right here, one study reported 60% of gay couples reported sex outside the relationship within the first year, and nearly 90% outside the relationship if it was 5 years or more. So there's more Sodom, there's more damage to rear ends coming from this type of relationship. And it's just, they're not holding it in on the streets of San Francisco, in my view. That's the only thing I can think of as to why it's so pervasive there. I get that homeless people at times don't care, and maybe they just feel they'll go anywhere. But I think there's an effect here from all the sodomy. And whether that's true or not with the San Francisco defecation issue, we know it's true for these things here. We know that they have greater risk of STDs, lesbians and gays, 3 to 4 times more likely. Okay, right there. If the class of people are 3 to 4 times more likely who practice one thing than those who don't, to be involved with people who have high-risk diseases like HIV, we know they're a greater cost to society. These are studies that have been documented. Mental health, it's been established. You can look this up. Anal cancer rates, they are skyrocketing because of sodomy. And yet no one talks about it. I've done 2 shows on it. People kind of look at it lightly and say, no, this is a really big problem. Look at the medical consequence of this promiscuity is that gays have a greatly increased likelihood of contracting HIV/AIDS, syphilis, and other STDs. This is not a small thing. Our kids are involved with a lot of these people. Our kids are involved with a lot of these people's kids who are all messed up because they're being abused, or they're abusing other people in ways that are causing them to be depressed. See, because it's wrong. It's not correct. But they're being told it's okay. So the people who are telling people what's wrong is okay need to be taxed. They need to be taxed. Everyone who accepts that as correct and then practices it, gay sex, to the detriment of society, they need to be taxed. Why? Because we have a sin tax. And it's not just, well, that's a sin, You're damaging people. You are damaging yourselves and the other person. You get to do that, but you're also damaging society. You're giving 20 years of productive life back, each of you. You're causing an increase in our physical health care costs. You're causing an increase in our mental health care costs. And we have a poop problem. San Francisco. So we have all these things. They're all connected to gay sex. You can keep doing it. I'm not here to make it illegal. I wouldn't even make it illegal because I think, like abortion, while it might help, it's just not going to solve the problem. The problem is the people, the choices they're making, and why. The influencing types as well, right? The ones who are wrongly pressuring people when maybe they're weak. See, this is why we have to tax them. And then you hit them in the pocketbook. Now they won't be so easy to promote things that destroy society, that damage families, and that are causing mental health to erode. So that's what I wanted to say on multiplying, increasing, filling the earth, what it means to be blessed by God in those ways, like our text says, versus the effects of things like sodomy and gay sex. So now let's talk about a few other things. But I thought I wanted to share that. I wanted to make it clear I do believe that gay sex should be taxed, not because I don't like gays. They're damaging people. They're damaging themselves, and they're damaging society in terms of the healthcare costs and the effects that gay sex has. I just read part of the documentation I have. I'm happy to do so again. Anyone who wants to have me on to talk about it, I will accept. Because I don't think people will talk about it the way it needs to be talked about. So if it's the right venue, you can be sure I'll talk about it. Like I just did. Don't expect it to be promoted too much, but it should be, right? Why wouldn't YouTube or other platforms promote what I just said? How is gay sex not a damaging act in the same way that tobacco, alcohol abuse, and these other things are? because they clearly are. That kind of act is damaging people, causing major increase in costs. And so that's one way we can help those individuals hopefully either make better choices or stop damaging other people in society so much. Now, the text talked about plant food and tree fruit as well. So I know I talked a lot about sex and sodomy and multiplying, but to me, gay sex is getting in the way of what Jah said we are to do. Fill the earth, multiply, and have sex the way we were made to do. That's not what gays are promoting. They're promoting abuse, okay? They're promoting an abusive style of sex that everyone can see is incorrect. But they want to be able to do it. Fine. I'm not here to object to your right to abuse yourself or someone else who's willingly accepting that abuse. But the effect you're having on everyone else and the effect that the damage you're causing to each of you has on us, 20 years loss of life, all the stuff, has to be taxed. And so I will support any initiative and I will continue to promote this idea in the right way, not because I hate gays or I'm afraid of gays. Give me a break. If anything, I can show they are expressing hate towards me and hate towards the things I say are correct for good reasons, and then promoting in place of what I'm showing is good for good reasons, what's wrong for good reasons. Now let's take a look at more of what's right. We get food from plants, lots of it. Fruit is one of the items we'll talk about in a moment, because remember it talked about plants as food and trees that bring forth fruit from their seed, and how these would be for food for the animals and for the humans. And I'll discuss in a moment some of the features we have that are consistent with that. Our teeth, for example, they're not made like carnivores are normally. Our teeth are more consistent with omnivores type, I would say, features, but certainly more along the lines of chewing things like nuts and biting carrots and things like lettuce and celery. So we have a variety of teeth that do different things, but we're not carnivorous at all, and yet we're alleged to have evolved from other creatures that are more carnivorous. Although I would say even many primates don't have necessarily a full meat diet from what I read. So we're very similar in certain ways, but they also have to fight to exist with other types of creatures that we don't. And so they're built for that kind of combat. Whereas we're not. Even when we fight today, right, we've got to put on mouth guards and pads, and people still get knocked out. Humans just aren't built like that. So our teeth are a sign of the way we were made and the things we were made to do. And according to Genesis, it was to eat plant food and tree fruit. Other than the tree fruit, which we'll get to in a moment, plants give us leaves, stems. So other than the fruit part, you got the leaves, the stems, celery, lettuce, beets, roots, which are potatoes, carrots, beetroot. Oh, let me get this all in there. Sometimes these things adjust. Radish, parsnip, and then seeds, wheat, rice, legumes, nuts, tree nuts, walnuts, almonds. And then we have fruit. Oh, well, let me show a few more. So these are actually more of the plant food. And the fruit I'll show you in a moment. But these are examples of things that are grown from plants, not trees. So you have berries of all types, tomatoes, plums, corn, peppers, grapes, all these wonderful things, all these beautiful fruits and stuff that you can look up. We eat them all the time, of course, and you can look up the richness of their nutrients, all the colors. They're just, whenever you see a beautiful tray of plant food like this, it's, even if you don't like vegetables or plant food very much, it just looks delicious, right? And it has so many things. And of course, you can cook potatoes and things in so many ways, as well as corn. And then here is some examples of tree fruit. All these beautiful things, plums, apples, cherries. So, you could, like with the creatures of the earth that we reviewed in our prior videos, like with the trees we shown in terms of their foliage in different colors. Excuse me. I could do a whole show just on one of these fruits or one of these plant foods because of how they're made, the way they're made, the way they grow, their design, their produce value, their different tastes. These little star fruits here. All of them are unique in these different ways. All these nuts and things, pears, pomegranates. I could keep scrolling. It wouldn't end. Well, maybe, but there's so many. Lemons, limes. According to the Genesis text, this is what we were given as food. This and the plant food. Our teeth and jaw structure are consistent with eating this type of food. However, the Bible goes on to describe the garden in which all of this was made as much different. And even after the time, which we'll get to, involving Adam and Eve and their being thrown out of the garden, the cultivation of the earth appeared to remain very high up until the time when Cain killed Abel. And then the text actually states, and it states both with respect to Adam and Eve and Cain, that there was a curse in effect, and that the ground would no longer give its power. The earth would no longer give forth its power. And so that was a time, of course, when you had things like the tree of the knowledge of good and bad, the tree of life, all these different things, but they were better. They were more powerful. Excuse me. At least according to the biblical text. And then those cursing actions came. And so now, even though we have all these things, we're still under a curse. We're still not seeing things the way they were supposed to be, because the ground, the earth, is not giving its power. And we haven't gotten to those texts yet, so I'm just referring to them so you can kind of sense the contrast. Because even though I'm showing you fruit and foliage and plant food and all this stuff, and I showed you trees before, none of it is like what was originally there. Remember, the earth at one time sustained the dinosaurs, massive creatures that would have required a lot more growth. Everything was bigger. The insects were bigger. Humans were bigger, as is evident by our wisdom teeth. And the fruit and food of the earth was more powerful. It could allow you to live. It could let you know what's right and wrong, depending on Jaw's associations with it, of course. But nonetheless, because certain things are action-based, once you do something, then you know it's wrong. So simply by laying down a law with regard to whether or not you should eat or not, would then have a consequence attached to it. And then that consequence would have attached to it a right or a wrong. And so we'll get to those things more in a little bit. But nonetheless, in these cases, we have all these things that show, at least in some sense, what the earth was like, its true power. So we have plenty of evidence to show the things that were made and that the Bible describes in these Genesis texts, and which are consistent with what we eat and use today. We're able to exist off of a diet consisting of pretty much all these things. And even though people believe you do need certain things like meats and stuff or certain levels of B12, that's not really true. You can get enough protein and things from nuts and other things like rice to compensate you. But the earth was different. And so it wouldn't have been as hard back then as it might be today to live off only these things, the plant food and the tree fruit. But it will be a lot easier for us to live if we practice sex the right way, if we become fruitful and multiply to the extent that we're able, and we do not promote abusive practices. No. And if we do, I say they should be taxed.